Welcome to chapter 11. This chapter changes the very foundations of modern strategic management because it transforms critical thinking. Remember, we have been talking about critical thinking on and on during the first chapters. Transform critical thinking into discernment. In the first chapter, we saw how, to make decisions, modern strategic management relies on critical thinking, which is an intellectual exercise, linking the environment with the strategies and the results. You remember in the experiential learning, we saw all the example of Starbucks. However, in all previous chapters of realism, in the last chapters, we begin to question critical thinking because it is based on empiricism, subjective idealism, both epistemologies with important weaknesses. Discernment instead is based on realism. It introduces the dimensions that we saw in the previous chapters: consciousness, values, the meaning of life, relationships, greatness, transcendentality, participation, religiosity, spirituality. John Cation, he lived between 360 and 430, proposed an intuition of discernment based on values, on our capacity to perceive them. To discern the value of an interpersonal exchange, I must consider what are my values, the values of the other person, and the value of what we are exchanging, and in these dimensions. This reflects the phenomenological intentionality that we discussed in chapter 7. Ignatius of Loyola presented a very rich conception of spiritual discernment, integrating the dimensions that we discussed in chapters 7 through 10. In his spiritual exercise, Ignatius presents his rules of discernment to interpret what he calls the motions of the soul, that is, consolation versus desolation. This is the core of discernment for Ignatius. When we make that decision, we may feel consolation or desolation. Thoughts, imaginings, images, ideas, emotions, inclinations, desires, feelings, repulsions, attractions, fear of death, desire for health, the concern for family, caused by good or bad spirits. Spirit is a very general concept. Consolation refers to sentiments, such as feeling alive and connected to others, filled with love, joy, peace. Desolation, on the other side, refers to sentiments such as feeling in dense darkness or turmoil, confusion, doubt, disgust, lacking faith, hope, or love. However, it is more complex than this. I may feel consolation even though I make a bad moral decision, and I may feel desolation even though I make a good moral decision. So it's not that morality and discernment are so easily, they don't go together so easily. For example, I may feel consolation by having an affair with a married person and breaking a family, or I may feel desolation after helping someone in need, which causes me some financial distress. So you see, it's not so simple to make a decision based on discernment. How can I know if my consolation is the result of making a good decision, or my desolation the result of making a bad decision? To solve this dilemma, Ignatius recommends his rules of discernment, which present ways to discern whether my consolation or desolation is the result of a good or a bad decision by listening, reflecting, interpreting the emotions of the soul. Psychology, spirituality, and morality converge on the exercise of discernment. Ignatius introduced his rules of discernment as part of his spiritual exercises, which involve meditations, contemplations, prayers, to help people deepen their spirituality and their relationship with God. He was Christian. The spiritual exercises are structured in 4 weeks. In the first week is a reflection on God's love in our lives, to develop a spiritual sense, which leads to discover God as a source of life and happiness. You know, it seems that we are changing the topic because we are talking about something that is very, very religious. But don't worry, we will try to round up these ideas for people that do not have any religious belief. In week 2 of the spiritual exercise is to learn to follow Christ, introducing discernment. This is where Ignatius introduces the discernment. He provides several models to try to understand how to decide among all the alternatives that we have, which leads to a profound personal and social transformation. In week 3 is participation in Christ's passion and death to share his mission through personal purification, becoming free from all attachments. In week 4, keep this in mind, because although we are this seminar is not specifically doesn't defend a specific religion, is general, but you see that the concept is universal. So to make decisions, to make discernment, we need to become free from all attachments. In the exercise that we will do at the end of this chapter, you will realize how important this is. Number 4, to meditate in Christ's resurrection through the contemplation to reach love, we get introduced in the most extraordinary reality, his love, his Trinitarian life, sharing his mission to bring love to all, the engines of leadership and social transformation. Discernment promotes social leadership based on its ability to build a vision of the future based on discernment, not merely critical thinking, a key competence of a person or organization that seeks the best for the entire society. A mission based on discernment involving the highest values and greatness of the person and community. Relationships based on discernment emerging from personal values among discerning people who seek the best for all. Transcendence based on discernment, making decisions that have a positive impact on the community. Discernment based on spiritual exercises which lead to personal and community transformation. Okay, so I would like to do an exercise that I think will help tremendously to understand what is discernment. To exercise discernment, try to remember a decision that you made or that you need to make. How could you make that decision relying on discernment? Several authors recommend using the Enneagram to help our discernment. This may be weird for some of you that probably use Enneagram for psychological issues, but you will see how the Enneagram has practically, in a nutshell, all the intuitions that we have been discussing in all these chapters 3, 6, and until this chapter 11. Oscar Icaso developed the Enneagram in 1960 with roots in mystical Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Taoism, Buddhism, and ancient Greek philosophy. Practically the same things that we have been using throughout the last chapters. The Enneagram is a powerful tool for personal and collective transformation, stemming from the Greek words ennea, that means 9, and gramos, that is a written symbol. The 9-pointed Enneagram symbol represents 9 distinct strategies for relating to the self, others, and the world. This is exactly what we have been talking, studying on the chapter 6, chapter of realism, phenomenology, and everything. Always the self, others, and the world. Each Enneagram type has a different pattern of thinking, feeling, and acting. You see, this is what we have been discussing. In chapter 6, chapter 7, we have been talking about exactly this, thinking, feeling, and acting that arises from a deeper inner motivation of our worldview. Learning about these patterns fosters greater understanding through a universal language that transcends gender, religion, nationality, and culture. Exactly what we have been discussing. So that these ideas are universal. It doesn't depend on any specific religion. It really depends, they are universal ideas. While we are all unique, we share common experiences. This definition shows that Enneagram is aligned with the phenomenological intentionality, especially that we discussed in chapter 7. It connects ourselves with the selves of others, with the world. It connects our spirituality, our psychology, and our behaviors, our morality, our decisions. This is a summary of the Enneagram that is presented in the book of Bergin, Ellis, and Fitzgerald. The Enneagram teaches that through childhood, people live different experiences that lead everyone to move in different directions and find different responses, solutions, and refuge. Bergin and Fitzgerald show how some people escape or try to find refuge in the heart. Let me show you. in the heart, here, some in the guts, and some in the mind. So it's difficult to write with the mouse. And even in that refuge, some people go to the wind of the social or interior or a balanced world. So social or interior or balance between both. This gives origin to 9 refuges that we resort in our lives. Why the Enneagram can help you in your exercise of discernment? Richard Rizzo and Russ Hudson explain how the Enneagram helps me to discern by recognizing my virtues and my passions. Remember, we talk about when we're talking about the discernment of Ignatius of Loyola. He talks about both my shadows, my compulsions, my limitations, my illusions. The Enneagram helps me to discover my true self, who I am, and my false self, a mask that I created to live in the world, to connect to others, to please them. This has a strong root on Buddhism that speaks about the true self and the false self. The true self is who I really am, and the false self is something that I develop to survive in the world, if you want. The Enneagram is like a mirror that shows me who I am. The Enneagram helps us to understand how I make decisions. Do I rely on my head, on my heart, or my guts? It helps discover my obstacles to discernment and how to overcome them. Your experiential learning in this chapter is to learn more about you by identifying yourself with some of the different types of these 9 types. How your history led to be who you are today. Your compulsions. How they affect your discernment. How they affect the way you make decisions. This is what I'm showing here is the different personality types. Each slide will focus on one of them. In this case, it's a perfectionist. This is the only one that I'm going to stop. I will show you all the others, so you can do the entire exercise, but I will explain only this one. What is my personality type? Am I a 1, 2, 3, 4? You need to select which personality type reflects who you are, and can be several. Can be a lot of 1, a little of 2, some of 3. So you have to realize exactly what composition of types you are. For example, the type 1 is the perfectionist. You have a need to be perfect. You feel that your parents love you if you are perfect. If they criticize you, you become resentful and humorless. You learn to live to the expectation of others. The compulsion of the perfectionist brings about the resentment and anger of not being able to be always as perfect as expected. You are never as perfect as you believe that you should be. How can the Enneagram help me to improve my discernment? And here is the connection to discernment. What are the obstacles to discernment of number 1? Now we are going to focus on this part here. The obstacles are paying too much attention to errors and mistakes that you run the risk of being over-discerning. How can you overcome these obstacles? Acknowledge and accept reality as it is, understanding that there is an intrinsic perfection, even in that which is flawed. Okay, so from now on, I will not go one by one. I'm only show you, this is number 2, the helper, so you can do the exercise by yourself. I will pass them slowly, so you have time to stop the screen and read by yourself and decide which is your type, which are your obstacles to discernment, and how you must overcome those obstacles, how you can overcome those obstacles. This is the 3, the achiever. This is the 4, the artist. This is the 5, the observer. This is the 6, the supporter. This is the 7, the optimist. This is the 8, the leader. This is the 9, the mediator. I hope this exercise helps you to realize the difference between critical thinking and discernment. Critical thinking is rational. It's a rational exercise. It's just intellectual. You analyze practical information using your reason. Discernment is very different. It helps you to make decisions relying on all possible knowledge, especially about you, your consciousness, your values, your morality. Remember that we talk about John Cation, that the discernment is based on values. You need to know your value, and you need to read the values of others. And you need to assess the value of what you are interchanging when you are interacting with others. Your morality, the way you make decisions, the way others make decisions, your spirituality, your connectedness with others, a profound awareness of who you are, your psychology, your virtues, your passion, your brokenness, your values, your morality, your capacity to transcend, to do great things. And the same related to others. Why is this chapter key to answering the problems of chapter 1? This chapter responds to the first problem of chapter 1. Discernment can enrich modern strategic management, involving all the dimensions of previous chapters in our decision making. Ways of listening, reflecting, interpreting thoughts, imaginings, images, ideas, emotions, inclinations, desires, feelings, repulsions, providing key competence to organizations, engines of social leadership. Pay attention to that detail. We are talking about competencies. Discernment is a competence. It's an ability, it's a skill that you develop that help you to make better and richer decisions. Discernment is a competence, so it's something that supports the strategic management, supports the strategies of organization. Discernment can explain the statistical results of chapter 3, because discernment is connected to realism, which supports the conceptual model of chapter 2, which helps to solve the second problem of chapter 1 by explaining the social impact of the different approaches of modern socioeconomic sciences based on their epistemologies. In this case, discernment is part of realism. Thank you.